Hi, it's John here again with another Creative Entrepreneur's Journey, and this time we've got Stephen Henry. Stephen's a author, a web coach, and a mentor to many different other entrepreneurs. And before we get started with the rest of his story, maybe you can share a little bit, Steve, about what it is that really lights you up, and just a little bit about where you are right now in your journey.
Sure. John, welcome, and I'm glad to be here with you today to share a little bit and talk. As you know, I'm a bit of a storyteller, so we share interest in that regard. And I think that for me, the place that I'm at right now is a place of involvement and engagement with other entrepreneurs. I absolutely love it. It's my passion to share experience and to help other people move forward. I've been fortunate in my life, and I've done a lot of things. I've been in business since I was 12 years old. We can talk about a lot of the things on that path, but it's led me to a place where I have a lot to share. As an old guy, I've also got a fair bit of current information. I'm constantly learning and updating and staying current with the technology. I've been around the internet since before it was public, and I've built literally hundreds, perhaps even thousands of websites. Lost count long ago, and I share what I've learned both in business and the internet and in personal development with those getting started. I try to find ways to give them a hand up and a step up into the things that they're trying to do. I'm told I have a knack of making things understandable, taking the technology, the overwhelm, the confusing things that tend to hold people back, and putting them into terms that people can understand. Perhaps the storytelling helps with that. And it's that kind of giving back that is so important to me, because I recognize that that's really what life is, and what the universe is all about is just an understanding and a sharing between us. So that's what I try to do. I don't always deliver as well as I would like to, but it's where I'm at, and going forward from here, it's where I hope to be for a long time.
So, what would you say is what got you started in business and writing? Was it the technology first, or was it the writing? Like, I know that you've, like you said, done so many different things. What would you say was really what got you on your journey?
Well, I think a big part of it has to come from reading. I started, I read fairly early. I was fortunate in the fact that I had a mom and a dad that shared with me and read to me a lot, got me interested in books. A couple of very early school teachers shared things about reading and got me into some books. My first book that I really remember, of course, was Dr. Seuss' Cat in the Hat, and I still think that there's actually a lot of value in that book. Adults should really go back and take a look at that again and read it. You'll find that Dr. Seuss didn't really just write for kids. But I got into a lot of the classics early on. We were talking earlier about H.G. Wells and Jules Verne and some of the authors like that, and I got into the technology early, before the technology was even there. I was born in 51, so my childhood years were in the 50s, and while everybody else was watching Leave It to Beaver, I was reading Jules Verne and struggling through some other science fiction. Discovered Asimov and Farmer and Frederick Brown and others like that fairly early. So that got me into the fantasy and the fiction of technology, and developed an interest in it. I started working fairly early. I actually really started working, if you want to think of it that way, as a younger child, because I grew up on a small farm, and there were always chores to do. And so early on, I had responsibilities and jobs to do around the farm, which I think taught me a little bit about getting things done. I'm sure I I don't have an awful lot of recollection of any bad times, but I'm sure I, fought and fussed about it from time to time. I do recall being a little impatient and bored when my dad used to call me to help out sometimes on a job that needed done, and he needed an extra pair of hands, even just to hand him tools. And so I sometimes perhaps resisted about that. But it's funny today because even now I'll find myself doing things, and certainly over the last 10 or 15, 20, 25 years, I've had many, many occasions where I've gone to do something that's new the first time I have to do it, only to discover that I know how to do it. And I kind of stop and sort of wonder why. And then I realize it was those times working with my dad or simply watching my dad that I learned so much about physical things around a house, around a farm, that I learned how to do things. And had the opportunity to, to build forts and tree houses and things, learned how to use a hammer and a saw, basic tools. So as I progressed on in my life, I had these basic skills that I could build upon. I got into regular work just by chance. I helped my sister. She had she was 7 years older than I was, and she had a paper route, and I helped her with that. And then when I got a little older, I got my own paper route and a TV guide route. And we lived in a rural area, but we were on a stretch of road that had a number of houses very, very close. So it was like a little community out in the farm country. And my paper route was I think 100 and I think at max it was about 104 people, which is a lot of paper route, a lot of farms to cover on back roads in the rural areas. 104 houses. So I did a lot of walking and I had a lot of time to think and fantasize and have ideas and so on. And so then I started writing early because I read so much. I had stories in my head as I walked and went from mailbox to distant mailbox. In the summer, I rode my bike. In the winter, I trudged along in the snow. And at that time, my dad worked quite a distance away, had a full-time job, plus had to keep the farm going, and didn't have a lot of time to drive me on the paper routes. If I wanted to have one, I had to do it myself. And so I learned. And then when I was about 14. I sort of inherited a bunch of greenhouses. What actually happened is there was a property next to ours that had been a part of our farm, and my dad had sold it to a fellow who in turn had sold it to another fellow, and it was a property that had greenhouses on it. And this other fellow was developing the greenhouses. He was a Dutch farmer and growing flowers actually in the greenhouses. And he went bankrupt, and my dad held the second mortgage on the property, so he was able to take the property over for the mortgage, and we got the property back. My dad rented out the house, but the greenhouses sat unused. And when I was 14, I decided I wanted to try my hand at my own greenhouse farming, and I grew vegetables which I sold to the neighbors. So now I was developing the skill of handling money and responsibility and deadlines. You had to pick the crops when they were ready, not when you felt like it, and a variety of things that had to be done. It wasn't so bad weeding in the greenhouse. They tended to not to have a lot of weeds grow because it was a controlled environment, but you certainly had to water and do very thin out the carrots when they started coming in, things like that. So it was again a learning experience and responsibility. So all of those things shaped who I was going to be, and I think that's foundational to it.
What led to technology though? What was that transition? Certainly some people kind of have different influences or people and stuff. It seems like reading was one influence and stuff, but were there people that kind of really inspired you to get more into technology itself?
I'm not sure who it was that led me into it. And I'm honestly, I don't remember where the first impetus came for technology, but I got involved in technology as a young teenager. And this is before computers. Remember, it's in fact when I was in high school, I went on a math trip. I forget what grade it was, maybe perhaps grade 10. We went on a math trip to Waterloo University, which was a couple hours drive from where I lived and went to school. And a busload of us went to the math class to actually see the computers there. And the Waterloo Computer Center, which was kind of the Silicon Valley of Canada at the time. I lived in Canada then. And there were all kinds of computer-related companies building up around the university campus, with a kind of a Silicon Valley type of development going on, way before anything even before the development in the East, the MIT development. So when I was a younger teenager, computers, certainly home computers, didn't exist at all, and computers of any kind were mainframes in controlled environment rooms, raised floors, big boxes, all that kind of stuff. And I got my first experience programming in Fortran at that time. But before that, I worked with audio, and I actually wired up my house for sound. The family house had speakers in all the rooms to play different music and could switch through. A closet in my bedroom got wired up with little amplifiers and various things I could tie into radios and tape recorders and record players, turntables. We actually had round discs that had scratches in them, that made music in those days. And this is pre-digital by a long shot, and so I played with that kind of stuff unprofessionally, just an amateur. Got involved. I did soldering and circuits and that kind of thing without any training. I'm going to work my way through it. And as I say, somebody must have put me onto that, and I don't know who it was. And I used to bug my dad because on his way home from work, he passed by an electronics store, and I would get him to pick me up an amplifier or some resistors or something, all the time. So it was quite good. Well, that led to a job as a disc jockey. I actually got, because of my interest in music, I got involved with a company that did weddings and banquets and parties and things, live DJ work. And so, I was working again professionally in an extension of the field. And so my interest in electronics and mechanics was well-founded. And then when computers came along, when I first started hearing about computers, the Heathkit and that kind of thing, I got interested because of the electronics. And then I was actually working in a job where the fellow there was old. He was in his 60s. That's old. And he was he seemed old to me at the time because I was in my 30s, and in fact late 20s at the time. And I had this job, and he was talking about computers and going to computerize the office records and so on. And so he assigned me to look into the availability of computers. And a small business computer at that time was actually about the size of a desk. You sat at it. It had a keyboard built into this big box and had a monitor that was part of it that was attached to it. We now set them on the desk, but they were attached to the desk as part of the unit. And IBM produced them, and they were about $25,000. And they were and they did very little. And software was hugely expensive. So that was the status it was at. But I kept reading things, in Scientific American and other magazines. I kept reading things that were coming, and ideas and concepts and artist conceptions of people having computers in their homes. And shortly after that, things like the Commodore VIC-20 and the Atari and a few other basically toy computers. I mean, they were powerful computers, but they were extensions of video games. Really, it was the video game market that brought that along. Right. And And so I happened to, somewhere along that line, back when I was about 18, I got into the antique business. My parents had been involved in antiques, and I had helped them do a couple of antique shows,
Hmm.
a place where antique vendors gather together in a big building. They each have booths and they sell their wares. And I liked that idea better than having a store where you had to wait for people to come. I just liked the
Hmm.
idea of taking the antiques to the people, going out and finding a place. So I started doing antique shows. And while I was in high school and early college, I would spend my weekends driving around the country going to antique shows with a van load of
Hmm.
antiques. And that eventually led me to do antique shows. And from that, I picked up a lot of extra stuff. When you're buying things for antique shows, you
Hmm.
often buy bundles of things, boxes from
Right.
people's attics, or
Or
storage
estate
units,
sales and stuff. Yeah.
estate sales, exactly. And you end up with a
Yeah.
a pickup truckload of stuff to get three things that you really want.
Hmm.
So I started doing flea markets to get rid of the rest of the junk. And where I lived at the time, a great big mall had gone out of business. A big indoor shopping mall had gone out of
Hmm.
business, and some developer had bought it and converted it into a big flea market, and had booths set up in the stores and in the concourse. And I ended
Hmm.
up getting a booth there and selling a lot of junk. And the guy in the booth next to me had VIC-20s. Commodore VIC-20 computers with the game cartridges, and he would rent them to people
Right.
week to week. He would you go to him on a Saturday at the flea market, and you would rent the VIC-20 and 3 or 4 games and take it home with you for the week
Wow.
and play the games, and then bring the whole thing back the next Saturday. And I don't know, it was like $8 to take this thing for the week. It was kind of great. Well, we got talking, and he said, "Why don't you try one of these?" And I took the VIC-20 and some cartridges home, Pirates Adventure and a couple of other adventure games I
Hmm.
remember playing on it, and got kind of hooked on the idea, and brought it back the next week, and I ended up being a regular customer, taking the thing home every week with me, so my kids could play. Yeah, my kids. And Dad, can we have the joystick now? So I got a lot of experience in computers, and this fella said at one point that he was looking to do a different flea market to expand, but there was still enough business here, and would I partner with him and run his table,
Hmm.
because I could sell my junk and rent his VIC-20s from the same 2 booths side by side, no problem.
Hmm.
And so if he gave me half of his VIC-20s and half of his game cartridges to keep the booth set up, and he went off and did another one, would I do that? So I got into the computer business, renting VIC-20s kind of inadvertently. And that led to growth into computer sales and computer repairs. I mean, my natural curiosity and electronic experience got me into the insides of the computers when the Commodore 64 came along, and then the IBM PCs, and it grew. And so that got me into that. And we had back in, I think it was around 83 maybe, I started looking at computers for myself to buy a computer. I was now looking to buy a household computer that we could use. And the IBM PC had just come out, and I started looking around at different things, and I couldn't really, kind of make up my mind on it. It took a while. And then I decided I think it was about 87, to buy a Commodore 128. And the Commodore 128 is a very interesting computer. It should have done a whole lot better than it did, and it should have gone on to be the standard for computing, but it didn't. It actually had 3 operating systems. It had 3 internal processors. It was an interesting concept. Commodore was developing and branching out. The Commodore 64 was a huge success financially, in the marketplace. And they were branching out into other areas. And I think the Commodore 64 probably resulted because they couldn't quite make up their mind. The Commodore 128 rather. Some people thought it was just a bigger Commodore 64 with more memory in it. 64 and 128 K of memory. K. Wow. So the Commodore 128 was actually 3 computers. If you booted it up and held a certain switch in place, it booted up as a Commodore 64. And it didn't emulate a Commodore 64. A lot of people also thought that it emulated a 64. It was a 64. It had the Commodore 64 chip in it, and it actually ran as a Commodore 64. Some of the keys on the keyboard didn't work because they weren't supported by the Commodore 64. If you boot it up in its native mode, Commodore 128, it was again a different chip that was and used a native operating system that was designed for the Commodore 128, and it was quite a powerful system. It was both a business computer and a gaming computer. The Commodore 64 was a marvelous computer because it was a gaming machine. It had sprites and various other things built into it that made it basically a video game in a box. And it could then, with software, with cartridges to plug in or discs, it could emulate any kind of video game that was out there in the marketplace. But the Commodore 128 in its native mode was not like that. It didn't have the same gaming capability as the 64. It was predominantly a business machine. It was one of the first computers to have an 80-character screen. Up until then, most of them had 40-character screens. And so it now had an 80-character screen, and you could actually produce regular business letters on it. It was just an amazing machine. And then the third chip in it was a Z80 processor, which was in my estimation, the processor that should have gone on to become the personal computer of the day, but instead the IBM chip became, the IBM PC, and that chip had a lot of issues with it, design limitations. It wasn't so much flaws, but it was design limitations, and it's why it took so many years for the IBM style computers to catch up with the Mac, because the Mac was an advanced chip, and the Z80 was an advanced chip, but it was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and never got very far. The Z80 ran the CP/M operating system, and CP/M was a precursor to DOS. Bill Gates actually studied CP/M in university when he went to class occasionally, and learned enough about it to create DOS to run on the IBM chip. But CP/M was a much slicker language operating system at the time. It had multi-threading and all kinds of things that didn't come along in the PC until many, many years later. But it died an untimely death because it just never got accepted. Bill Gates was a superior marketer, and he sold his product to IBM, and IBM had the clout, and then Bill Gates with Microsoft took it further, and CP/M and the Z80 chip and the process that could have gone died, and got lost in the annals of history. But I had hooked my star to that computer and loved it, and still have it. It's sitting over here in a corner on a desk, and it works. And I still have game cartridges and games on disc. Below the Root is one of my all-time favorites, and a couple of fighter simulations that are far ahead of its day, almost as good as some of the simulations today, if you can accept the boxy graphics. But it's that got me into computers and that sort of stuff. So when I bought the computer, a couple of years went by, we using it, and I wanted to get online because I heard about online stuff. And one of the biggest online deals at the time was a place called Quantum Link. You may not remember that, but Quantum Link is the precursor to America Online. America Online grew out of Quantum Link. Quantum Link was, in essence, a giant bulletin board system. And you could call into it and get on it. And I had seen it in a couple of places. A couple of my clients had access to it, and I'd seen it there when working on their computers. And I thought, this is fantastic. So my two daughters had got some money from their aunts for Christmas, and modems were expensive in those days, and between the two of them, they had enough for half of a modem. So I said, hey, I'll match your money, and I will get you, I'll pay the difference to a modem, and we'll get the computer online, and we'll be able to do some neat stuff. And I'm not sure that they actually wanted to do that with their money. I think they were more looking at maybe dolls and dresses and other pretty things. Anyway, they got a modem, and Dad can be a little persuasive sometimes. And we got online, and boy, did they get excited about it. They absolutely loved it. It was a great experience for them, great learning experience. And I discovered the online world. Now, we were in a rural location at that time. I had moved from the big city out into a small town, and we did not have, I mean, there was no internet in those days. This is
I was going to say,
1989, no internet.
Right.
Well, there was internet. There was ARPANET and NSFNet, and very, very shortly, I would actually be. I was already on those through my job, which was at Motorola at the time, and so I was on the precursor to the internet, and I would be involved in NSFNet as it began to become a little bit public, and then very quickly became the internet as we know it today. But at that time, there was no internet. Your only connectivity was dial into a university or a corporation where you had a connection that you could get somebody to kind of let you connect through and get in. I had connection through Motorola and through a friend of mine who was a professor at a university, and so I had two channels to get into the internet, one through ARPANET and one through the NSFNet. ARPANET, of course, was the military internet, and which was the original design of the internet. And NSFNet, the National Science Foundation, was the university backbone.
Right.
And, so I had both.
And there's probably only a few people around these days that remember, like you were saying with the modem, the whole scratchy protocol thing that had to go
the dial up and the sound of the two of them, the hands shaking with that scratchy noise. It was fun. But the first modems were 110 bits per second. 110 bits. I mean, we talk in megabits.
Wow.
Or gigabits of transfer today,
right?
And they were talking 110 bits per second. In fact, at Motorola, I had a modem. Motorola was in the modem business. They had a division called Codex, which was a modem company, and we had 110 baud or 110 bit modems that if I had a report to file with the head office, I would take that report and have it digitized. My secretary would digitize the report. It was something we had typed out on a typewriter. Remember those? And so you didn't have a digital copy when you created it. You created it on paper, and then she would scan it in. And we were using early OCR stuff to get the characters. She'd have to go in and edit the document because there'd be errors in the scanning, and she would get that document prepared in a digital format. I would start the transfer to head office just before I would go home at night. And when I came back in the morning, if I was lucky, it was done. And if not, if there'd been a glitch and these things didn't auto resend, if there were too many errors, it would crash out. I'd have to start it over the next night. I mean, that's where we were at in that time. So, man, I was there at the start. I'm and the funny thing is, it's not all that long ago. That was 1987, 1988.
That's what's crazy. It's in the amount of time that has gone by, like relatively speaking, it's really not that long. I mean, it seems like, like in internet time today, it seems like forever, but, like kind of, if you look at like just even, like when you, in the relative history of just technology as a whole, right? Like from the first, writing, to like on paper and that kind of thing, we're talking thousands of years, right? When paper was invented to now.
I'm not that old.
Well, no, I'm just saying though, like relatively speaking, digital technology is not
1987, 1989. I mean, go back to 87 when I started really on the internet in that sense. 87 to 2000. What's that? 13 years, and we're 2015 now, so we're talking 28 years. 28 years. That's
in the relative.
There's kids around that are 28 years old.
Right.
So really, when you think about it, I mean, it's nothing. My first two kids are both over 28 years old now. So I mean, it's astonishing what's available there, what's happened in such a ridiculously short time. But so in '89 we were on Quantum Link, but because we were located remotely, I had to dial long distance to a city where I could get a connection to a network that was called TimeNet. TimeNet was a pay-by-the-minute network that you could tie into to do digital
Right.
transfers across the country. And so I paid long distance, and I forget what the number was, but probably something like $8 an hour for long
Wow.
distance service. They used to have, a phone system in those days too. Local areas was where you could call. Now we have nationwide plans or world global
Right.
plans, and don't even think about it. But you used to have to pay by the minute to call outside of your local area. So I was
And that's a big shift that happened, just in that time frame.
quantum
That like,
shift.
that we went from the idea of paying per minute and stuff to now where it's like you get volumes of minutes available to you at, a fraction.
Yeah, and people complain about unlimited text. They don't have enough. Like it's just really the capability that we have gained in the last literally 30 years is mind-bending. And for the people that weren't there for it, for the millennials that are just using this stuff every day like it was always here, they really can't measure that difference. And I'm starting to sound like my grandfather, when he used to talk about stuff.
Oh no.
And it really truly blows me away, because I'm using the same stuff every day that the millennials are using, and I've got control of it. I've got the concepts and the technology all in my hands. But I'm sitting here in Kansas, in Bohunk, Kansas, a little small town in Kansas here, and I'm talking to you, John, and you're in Los Angeles. And well, you were in Los Angeles. Sorry about that. We lost the connection. How's that for appropriate while I'm talking about that? But I've got a camera and a webcam and a computer sitting on a desk in my home in Kansas, and we've got people watching this that can be from anywhere in the world, literally, and we are communicating. And even though there was a technical glitch that John got dropped off, I see that he's back again, and he'll be coming in and connecting again, I expect. And there, I think he's coming in. Oh, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But the technology is here, and we are able to go and communicate, and that's just phenomenal. So I started on this connection that cost me $8 to call the city of Guelph to connect long distance, and then $20-some an hour to connect across the country to tie into Quantum Link, which was somewhere in California. And we were using this, and my kids loved it and took off with it. And they were on, and they had their own friends. They were 5 years apart in age, so they had different friends. There were lots and lots of kids using this service, and there were adults using the service. And I was on it talking to technical people. Actually found that I was able to get technical help with things that I was doing and developing. And they were people from literally all over the world connecting. So I could imagine what some of the fees were. We were paying about $30 an hour average to connect. And I said one day, I have got to be able to do this cheaper myself. It's got to be a way to cut down the costs at $30 an hour. That was real money back then too, remember?
Yeah.
And at $30 an hour, I said, I got to be able to do this cheaper. So I looked into things, and I found out there was software called bulletin board software that allowed you to run a messaging and game sharing service online. Well, I had a Commodore 128, which could emulate a 64. And I could get, there was bulletin board software for the 64, and I tried some of it, but it really didn't allow you to do much. It allowed you to have one person connect by modem, and it allowed you to talk to that person in real-time chat, and maybe you could play a double-headed game over the service, but it really didn't do too much. And I had just been on Quantum Link, which was a global service that was just awesome by comparison, and I wanted something more. So I started looking into things, and I ultimately found a bulletin board system called Wildcat. There were a handful of big systems. PC Board was the real big one at the time, and Wildcat was kind of an upstart, but it was just better. There were just things about it. It was beautifully coded. There was a couple of young guys that were in Silicon Valley, again in California, that were putting this thing together. It was out of Cupertino, and there were just a number of good things about it that were awesome. And I grabbed a copy. There was you could get it for free, and I love free stuff. You could get it for free, but it only had one node. Or you could buy a commercial version that had 10 nodes, and that would network. You could actually get multiple computers and network it and have multiple calls in. One connection per computer, per modem, each modem on a computer, but and then network it, and it was there. So I ended up, by the time I shut that bulletin board down, I think in 1998, it went from 89 to 1998, I was the largest bulletin board in the region. I had connections literally for hundreds of miles across the province, and I had special tie lines that came in, long distance lines that allowed people to call in locally from cities. I had 7,500 users, including people as far away as France and Australia. Absolutely amazing to me what we developed out of a bedroom at the time. And working from home was not an option in those days. You were considered a jerk if you worked from home. You were low class and didn't, it was like self-publishing at the time too, man. You didn't want to self-publish. I see Kat Sturtz is watching right now, and she's had a lot of experience in the publishing field, and so she'll know what it was like if you dared to. They called it the oh my, I can't think of the name now, but Vanity Press. That was what it was called. Yeah, you thought you were somebody if you were self-publishing, and what it really meant was you couldn't make it. So the same thing was true in the in working from home. And here I was running a bulletin board system from my home, a little bedroom. We had eight computers set up. We had 7 phone lines coming in, tied into the 7 base computers, and the 8th computer handled the extra file drives. I actually got my first, get this, my first 1 gigabyte drive on that bulletin board system. And it also handled in the last 2 years of the existence, we had a satellite connection, a dish outside that connected to a satellite. We received email and other messaging and files via satellite from multiple services around. Well, this is really advanced stuff. But the internet was coming along, and the internet was taking away bulletin boards. Bulletin boards did things better and differently than the internet, and those people who were actually on bulletin boards, especially good bulletin boards, are very nostalgic for those days gone by, because even now with all the technology, bulletin board or the internet seldom equals the real community of the bulletin board. And
yeah, I was going to ask about that. Like, so what do you feel like, kind of like, you and I are both on Bill's forum and stuff. So how would you compare the forums of today, and for that matter, like a Facebook group, as we're all actually, I'm on the one Facebook group that you have, or among others and stuff. And what do you feel is kind of like has shifted with terms of, like you said, that
I think that's
community,
a powerful area
to
look at, and psychiatrists of the future are going to have fun analyzing this stuff. It's one of the things that I discovered when I first started with the bulletin board, and you talked about interviewing me and getting into some of the background and the personality, and this is maybe where it comes out, and some people will think this is good, and some people may think it's bad, and who does he think he is, and that's okay. I am who I am, and I think Popeye said it best. So but the reality is that when I first started on bulletin boards, as I always do, I research things. I check it out. I do not believe in the phrase "just do it." I think, yes, you have to do it. You have to put legs to it. You have to put action to it. A plan
Right.
without action is just a dream. It's not a plan at all. You've got to put action to it. So yes, I believe in doing it, but I don't believe you can just do it. You have to learn your craft. You have to do your research. You have to understand what's going on. And the only purpose to do it, in my opinion, is to do it better. So you want to look at what's out there and you want to get in on what's there, but you also want to do it better. And I've never been a believer when it comes to business coaching. I've never believed that a market is saturated and that you look at it and you have to steal a piece of the pie. The pie is already cut up between all the players. So either you don't get in the business or you got to get in the business and hack away a piece of the pie from somebody else. I don't buy that. I believe you get into a business in an area, and even if the pie is already divided fully, you make a bigger pie. That's what that's the solution, is make a bigger pie. Well, when I got in the bulletin board business, I looked around and I saw all these bulletin boards, and I saw a number of things they were doing. For example, they started clamping down rules, and I get passionate about this because I don't like rules. They clamped down rules that would say, if you're going to download a file, we've got file repositories on bulletin board systems in those days. That's where you got software for your computers if you didn't want to buy software. And I don't mean ripped off commercial software, what they used to call whereas, but the shareware and freeware, there was a lot of that out there, good stuff. Guys like Jim Butterfield and so on producing awesome software that they gave away for free or expected only a small donation for it, and it was great. But if you wanted a file, you had to write 3 messages in their message base, because nobody was writing messages. Everybody was just taking the files, people being where they are. So the system operators, the sysops, would figure out ways to make people do stuff. So you've got to write 3 emails to get a file, or you have to upload 2 files to get 1 file, share, that kind of stuff. And if you and they had games online that you could play. They were called doors. It was a terminology that came from the very earliest bulletin board, which was like a corridor with doors off it, and you went through a door into a game. And so games themselves got called doors. And a good bulletin board had a lot of doors so that you could offer a lot of games to people. If you wanted to play the doors, you had to upload a file or write in the message base, and you accrued credits for doing so, and you could use those credits to play doors. And this is before bulletin boards got overly commercial. They did get commercial later on, and people charged for them. I had 2 tiers on my bulletin board: free access and a charge system to cover some of the costs, because we got pretty expensive after a while. It was kind of hard to do it just as a hobby. But when it first started out, I looked at those things and I thought, well, that's kind of tacky. Like I saw bulletin board systems that had message bases full of messages that said, "Hi, how are you today?" The kind of things you get on Facebook from people, from India or Bangladesh that sign up and they want to friend everybody, and they friend you and they say, "Hi." And then you say hi back and they don't say anything, like that's the kind of stuff that you had there. You had these people that were just, the only thing they were writing a message for was to get points so they could upload files. Or they would upload files. They would upload copies of autoexec.bat or, some other standard system file off of their computer. They would rename that and upload it just to be an upload so they could download a file. And sysops got angry over that, and they got they got like the soup Nazi on Seinfeld, and no files for you. And so they kick people off and all kinds of things. And I see that happening today in forums and groups where somebody dominates the forum. And yes, you have to manage the forum. There has to be a manager. A forum without an administrator goes, to pot. But you've got to do it better. So on my bulletin board, what I started doing, and people told me it'll never work. It'll just never work. You'll be out of business. You'll have all kinds of junk, and you won't. They'll steal all your files, and you'll never have anything. And what I did is I said, hey, the files are here. Help yourself. Here's the message base. If you've got something good to say, say it. And here's the doors. We're going to put up a lot of doors, a lot of games for you to play. Play them if you like them. And people say, that's not going to work. We had the most active message base of any bulletin board system that I was ever on. Real messages, people interacting. We had file downloads, and we had the odd person that would come on at midnight and stay on for 6 hours doing downloads of everything they could get, even though they would never use it. They'd fill up hard drives and disk drives and floppy drives and everything with files that they could never use. We had 2 or 3 of those.
The equivalent of electronic hoarders.
But we would have people who would download a file because they would want it, and then they would upload 3 files because they found some good ones they wanted to share. And people normally are like that. They will share. You put restrictions on them and they resist. They fight against those restrictions. But you give them a chance to share and give and be good, and they will. And so, we found that happen. The doors, people played the doors. There was one door called Barons. I guess it was just called Barons, maybe. Or Baron's Empire or something like that. And it was a medieval landscape with fortresses and knights and horses and, peasants and so on. But it was kind of an environment simulation. You created your forts, you staffed them, you recruited armies. There were algorithms built into the game that there'd be so many, there'd be birth rates and people coming of age to be able to be drafted to the army, and you'd be the king of your empire. And actually, it was called Baron's Realm. That was the name of it. You'd be king of your realm, and you could go to war with neighboring areas to take over their material. And so the way that was played is you would go in each hour. Each hour was a year, I guess, or no, each hour was a day. I don't know how I forget now how it went, but each hour was a day, and every 7 hours was a week or something. But you would go in every hour anyway, and you'd make your strategic moves. You'd move armies, you'd attack places. You could move an army to a safe location, or you could attack a defended location, and you'd do a variety of things. You'd harvest the fields, and you'd plant crops, and a variety of things that you would do in this game. But you did them based on your projected planning, what you thought would work. And other players would do the same. So there might be an empty piece of land. It was a grid, and there would be an empty grid square, and you would move an army to that grid to capture that square for yourself. But some other guy might be moving his army to that grid, and you didn't know about it. And so both armies would move into the grid. That would mean a conflict. They would end up going to war, whether you had planned to do so or not. And there were algorithms that were basically dice rolls that pitted the various soldiers against each other and determined the outcome. Well, those algorithms were run every hour on the hour. So we would have 15 or 20 people locally playing those games, and at midnight and 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., the 7 phone lines would light up as people were trying to get in first at that hour to see what their results were and make their moves before other people knew what their results were. Man, we changed the personal lives of people around that county and ultimately around the world as they changed their lifestyle to suit the bulletin board world. And I mean, that was an impact. Locally, we put about 1,300 people on the bulletin board system, most of whom, probably 1,200 plus of whom, did not have a modem. They purchased a modem, got the software, and got on the bulletin board because they heard about it. That's a social change in a county, in a neighborhood. And my daughter and I would go out together or individually to people's homes and install their modem, set up the software, show them how to access the bulletin board, teach them that squeaky, scratchy modem sound so they could connect. I mean, that's impact. That's change. And it was done in a positive way. Well, the internet does that, and people get on the internet, and there are moderators of forums and groups that are like those sysops of old, who have to take control of that group and set down hard and fast rules and limit people, and then they wonder why they don't have the growth in their groups. Most of my groups are very free in terms of what I allow. has to be on topic. For I've got topical groups, so I've got groups on WordPress and I've got groups on Kindle writing. Okay, so the Kindle writers groups, I don't want people coming in and promoting books that are hardcover books that they have to buy at a store or through some other online service. I want Kindle books, digital books in there, and not Mobi. Or I'm sorry, Mobi, not EPUB, or PDF that can go on a Kindle. They got to be supportive of Kindle. But otherwise, they're free to post and promote. Now, my one largest group, which is predominantly a book promotion group, has over 20,000 people in it. And it's for promotion of books only. It's called Kindle Publishers. But I have a second group, which I started a couple of years ago, called Kindle Publishers 2, because the promotion group now is so busy with books being promoted in there every couple of minutes that the timeline goes so fast that a good discussion post gets lost. So I created a second group, Kindle Publishers 2, where I don't allow promotion of books, only discussion. But I do allow, in the discussion group, I do allow self-promotion. You want to, if you've got a service that you're doing for book publishers, book writers, and you want to promote it, great. That's good news. That's something to share. If you've got an affiliate program that you like some product and you've got an affiliate of it, you want to promote it there, that's okay too. I allow affiliate posts because I don't see affiliate posts as bad things. If it's a good product and it's worth using, then promote it. Why leave money on the table? If you're an affiliate or you're just promoting it because you like it, the affiliate gets some money for it. The non-affiliate gets nothing. But the cost to the subscriber who buys that service or product is exactly the same. So why leave money on the table? Affiliates are not evil things, but people seem to think they are.
That's a great point. Is the and I think what I find with especially indie creatives, what I call indie creatives, artists and stuff, that there's this certain kind of aversion or something hang up around money and stuff. And what would you say is kind of like shaped your, like your view about money though? Like what was like kind of for you, like kind of what kind of led to some, your revelations around money and how it, like it's just for you, clearly it's a natural part of, your creation of whether it's writing or the different other things.
Yeah, I write also. I've got some books on Amazon. I've got a couple of websites where I sell books that aren't on Amazon, and I write quite a bit. And I've got some fiction things that I'm working on that I just haven't got to as much as I would like to, and I really want to get those out. I had hoped to get them out this fall and haven't, so it'll be spring now. But and of course, I still read a lot. My Kindle over here, I've got 3,200 plus books on my Kindle, and that's I say that's either supreme arrogance or extreme optimism. I'm 64 years old, 3,200 books. Yeah, right. but the dollars and cents part, I guess that came because I trudged all those roads in the wintertime, my feet cold, my nose dripping, and delivering those newspapers. And then I went around once a week to collect the money for them. And I don't even remember what the fee was. That I think one time the newspaper went up to 42 cents a week, and people complained, and they blamed me too. It's like I'm a kid delivering newspapers, and I collect the fee, and I give most of that 42 cents. I think I got like 3 cents an account, 104 accounts. Do the math. So that was pocket money for me then, $3.12. It was great pocket money, but I trudged a lot of miles to get that $3.12. So I understood the value of money early. I was, as a 14-year-old, I was growing vegetables and selling them in the neighborhood, and I had to buy seed, and I had to get up early before school and go to the greenhouse and water everything and do all the stuff and harvest it and clean it and bundle it and take it around the neighborhood. I learned about making money. And making money is not a bad thing. That's that's how we exchange stuff. I would love to write books and give books to everybody. And then when I need to get groceries, I'd love to go down to the store and pick what I need, not what I want necessarily, not fill up carts with bundles of stuff, just what I need, which includes a few things that I like, and take that home. I'd love to do that. Well, that's makes people think of communism, and here in America people get really upset and edgy about that. So we have a thing called capitalism. We buy and sell. Well, if you're an artist, you have to get on the program and buy and sell. Realize that you've got a product, it's got a value, you sell it, you get money, you go buy your groceries, you pay for it. Money, currency, is just art. You create your art, your creative stuff, and you exchange it for money. That money is just your art in a different form. And you take that and you go over and you exchange it for food, gas, car, housing, electricity, whatever it is, computer, camera, whatever it is. It's just an exchange. It's no big deal. So get over it. And I got over it because of the miles I trudged in the wintertime uphill both ways. That's I grew up in Canada, remember. Canada, as a kid, it was real tough because, we lived in igloos, and my mom would say, go stand in the corner, and that did psychological damage to me. And getting up early for chores, we used to take a match, we'd light the match, hold it outside, the flame would freeze, we'd drop it in a pickle jar, carry it around, and light our way for the morning while we were doing our chores. So, yeah. So I'm a storyteller. So, yeah, it's fun.
Well, the thing is about money too, which is really, I think, ties into your career as well, is that I think we've gone more and more to what now has changed money itself, and not so much the nature of it in terms of like how the attitude so much. Unfortunately, that's still there. But I think it's become more and more information. In other words, just in in the time that we've talked about how the technology has changed this stuff. Money is also really, if you look at the history of money in terms of how it's become less of a tangible thing. Like where we still have paper money and all that, but now we've went to credit cards, in this time frame, to now, like, you can basically send money through PayPal and these other kind of digital, and then Bitcoin is a whole other discussion stuff. So I guess what I'm saying is that, like, it's interesting how money itself has become more and more about just simply being information, that, like, how much, value, if you will, like you said, is kind of traded between, like, let's say an artist and the person buying and stuff like that. And I think that's what's also been a shift in a more
I'm just old enough that my grandmother used to give me real silver dollars for my birthday. They were silver dollars that had a silver content that made them valuable. Right. And I'm just old enough. I'm not old enough for the gold standard. I'm not old enough for bags of gold and silver talons and things like that. So some people think I am, but I'm not. But I'm just old enough to have seen gold, or I've seen silver dollars. So that's good. And of course, I've owned a few gold coins, but they're symbolic more than anything else. You certainly don't spend them anywhere. But the paper money and physical money. I've been there to watch the quarter and the dime go from silver to just stainless steel or whatever it is now. I've watched the penny go from copper to whatever metal it is now. It's there's no value in them. They make them as cheap as they possibly can. If they could control them, they'd make them out of plastic. Or Teflon or something. And the paper money is disappearing. We're talking seriously about losing the penny and losing the dollar bill. Canada has already lost the dollar bill and the $2 bill, and I think they're talking about losing the $5 bill because they have coins there. The dollar coin. It's not the silver dollar anymore, but they've got a coin that is loosely referred to as a loonie because it has the loon, one of the birds of Canada, on the back of it. And so it's called a loonie. And then they have a $2 coin that came out, and it's called a toonie, just so it'll rhyme with loony, and Looney Tunes and toonie. But that's become a very popular currency in Canada. And when it first came out, everybody complained about it. About the same time, they tried to do that here in the States with the Susan B. Anthony dollar coin that was going to replace the dollar bill, and there was so much objection to it. It would wear holes in our pockets and all that kind of stuff. Of course, if they'd only thought about it, we were getting away from anything in our pockets. And like you say, digital money now. I earn my entire income online. All of my income goes through PayPal. I seldom ever actually see any of that money. We have a PayPal credit card that we use, a MasterCard, and so we can shop anywhere with the PayPal card. We occasionally take cash withdrawals out of the bank, so my wife can have some money in her purse, so she can go and buy something with cash. But mostly, we just do everything online. We shop online a lot, Amazon and other places, and we use our PayPal account to make payments. I buy business materials and business services online, pay for it with PayPal. I never actually see that digital money ever. It comes and goes month to month, and goes more than it comes sometimes. But I never ever see that. The whole concept of money is different. So my best advice to artists and creatives is get off it. Don't get bugged about that part of it. Get on with your art, your creativity, and don't be afraid to sell it. And don't be bummed about other people that are selling stuff. It's there. And to take that back, because I've certainly wandered, but your comment about the groups and the forums, I think there's always people that want to control. They want to draw lines in the sand, and they want to be in control. I think you're in more control the more you can let go. If you let go of things and let things happen and then guide them, don't define them, guide them, not only are you more in control in a subtle way, but more things happen. More great experiences occur, and you learn more and see more and share more, and that's, after all, what it's all about. I think it takes a little bit of rethinking, and I have been so fortunate over my life to experience all the things I've done. If you saw my resume, you'd never hire me, or you would hire me. I got told the other day by a person that I'm overqualified for a position that I put in a request for, and I am overqualified. But he's running as a filter, and my request will never go to the person that he was handling it for, because he's made the decision that I'm overqualified. But I also would be interested in doing that particular thing, even though I am overqualified. I could do it really well, bring that overqualified ability to the table. It's a short-term job that I would just like to do because I'd like to explore it. And it would be a learning experience for me. It would simply be an experience. But he made the decision, acting on behalf of the people that he was reaching out to find people for, to filter me out of the mix and not even give them the chance to accept. I think that's ridiculous. That's control that should never, ever happen. It's far too much controlling, and we really shouldn't be involved in that. We should be involved in sharing and giving and exploring and working with each other. John, we met online. You didn't know me. I didn't know you. But you, for some reason, saw me, interacted with me online somehow, and you came to me and said, "Hey, Steve, there's this forum that I'm part of, and I think you would fit in. Would you like to come?" That was your approach to me. I mean, that's giving, that's sharing, that's offering something of value. And I didn't know how to value it, but I had the opportunity to go to join the forum, to what I call sandbag a little bit, sit around and watch what was going on till I got a feel for it, to contribute, to see the feedback, to make my own opinion and my own choice of whether I stay or not. And I actually think in some ways that particular forum has gone down in quality, partly because it's gone up in members.
Right.
Bill, the guy that runs that forum, he's very keen on numbers. He seems to be changing a little bit, and maybe I've planted a seed or two in that regard. I don't know, but he does seem of late in some of his presentations to change a little bit. But in the past, in all the time that I've known him, I've been on there for over a year now, and in all the time that I've known him, he is a real numbers jockey. Big numbers. It's all about big. I think he carries a measuring stick around with him, a ruler or a tape measure, so he can measure everything, because it's all quantity. And although he talks about quality and other factors, he really in his soul is a quantity guy, bean counter. And I think that in pushing, because he wants the big numbers, in pushing for growth in his forum, he's lost the quality that was there. When I joined that forum, it was one of the best forums that I have ever been in. And I would say it's fair to Midland now. It's a good forum, and I'm still there, and I participate from time to time, but it is not as good a forum as it was. And I think part of that is the control that's exerted in that forum. Little things that restrict the freedom that people could have to make exchanges, and inconsistency in that management that makes it a little uncomfortable for the people on the recipient edge. And that's an example that we know, but I think that kind of thing, and you may not agree with me, which is okay, but that kind of thing I think is pervasive in Facebook and groups and forums that are out there. And it's when we overcome that we have the best of the best.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge discussion in itself, the idea of how to nurture a community and then like how to deal with the size versus quality issue and stuff. And I've experienced that as well in Tango myself, and so I definitely have seen what you're talking about. I guess here's the thing too, though, that like I've got to ask you, like, kind of, we're actually way over what the normal time that I go with this, but it's just been such a like a huge discussion around so many different things. But the thing I got to ask is, like, what was like a moment to you though that like you really was there ever like a point that like you really questioned what your path on the entrepreneur's journey, like that you kind of really thought like, am I on the right place, and like kind of that you kind of like, because that's one of the things I've always found with folks who are creative and stuff, is that in spite of their success and all that, the thing that there's always that certain moment that like they really kind of wonder, like what they're doing, and just kind of question things and stuff. And that's the thing that like I think isn't often heard. So would you have something like that you can share?
Well, yeah, I think there's been different moments through my life. I don't know that I've ever held a job. I've had a lot of jobs where I've worked for people, and I don't believe I've ever been in a paid, paycheck type job for more than 3 years. That either means I'm curious about other things or people can't stand me, one or the other. But I've transferred from job to job, and it's always been growing. I can look at various aspects of that and see moving from manager to director to vice president to executive vice president to CEO, and not always the company getting smaller as I do that. In some cases, moving up in position and in a bigger job. So there's been certain success in my work field, but I have left better jobs and taken lesser jobs, even laborer jobs, just because I no longer was comfortable or satisfied with the job, even though it paid well. I'm not a kind of person who takes a job because it pays and only because it pays. I have to enjoy that job. So I've had those moments in my life where I've had to decide whether my desire and feeling and creativity is more important to me than the paycheck, and every time I've voted for the creativity over the paycheck. Hasn't always worked out well financially, but it's been good. I've been very, very successful. I've had the big house, 12-foot ceilings, white pillars on the front porch, and big cars in the driveway, multiple cars, all that kind of stuff. I've been there, done that. And it's great. I recommend it to anybody who wants to get there, but don't necessarily feel you have to stay there. I live a more laid-back, smaller footprint existence today, and this is wonderful too. So, there's a scale of things that you can do, and you need to decide where you want to apply yourself. Hustling the buck to get to that big house, because that's what I thought the American dream was. That's what I was told the American dream was. That's what my mentors and coaches pushed me to do, and I realized that was wrong. I got there because I'm capable, but I wish I'd put the energy into some other things. So, there are, in reflection, there's the things I would rather have done. But to be honest with you, and I've played this game seriously a couple times with myself, I've looked back over my life and said, where are the big turning points that I would actually have made a different choice? And I honestly can't say there's a couple places. There's that girl in high school that I let get away, but there's a couple of places where I can think and go back and maybe it wouldn't, what if kind of thing. But really, there is not a single place in my life that I would absolutely want to change my decisions that I made, my big decisions. There's a couple of clients I took on that I probably would not today if I had the choice, that sort of thing. I'm a little more discriminating in that regard. But really, all through my life, all the choices, good and bad. And I've been there, as I say, with the big houses, but I've also been absolutely dead broke twice in my life. One of those times.
I was going to say, yeah, what was one of those times that kind of really you consider a dark time and really made you kind of wonder about things?
When you've made it and then you're dead broke, and in both cases when I was dead broke, it was after I had made it, and then unmade it, unceremoniously on my own. But the one that absolutely sticks in my mind, my first daughter was about 5 years old, and maybe a little older than that, maybe 7, and she was sitting at the breakfast table, and she looked up at me and she said, "Daddy, do we have to have porridge again?" Because literally all we could afford to buy was oatmeal, which we called porridge. And that was our meal, literally breakfast, lunch, supper, oatmeal. We were broke. We were living in a house that we were waiting to be kicked out of. It was a rented place, and we were waiting. We because of the business and the situation, we had paid ahead a little bit, but we were waiting for that to expire. And my own business had failed. It was not through my doing that it failed. I had a partner, and the partner absolutely did some things that caused it to fail, and he deliberately did those things against advice of members of the partnership. But we should have seen it coming. So I can't put it all on him. It was, I should have seen it coming and been more involved and more dynamic in what was going on. But I allowed it to happen. So it's my fault. And we literally lost everything. So her voice saying to me, "Daddy, do we have to have porridge again?" It changed me, and I went out and got a job, and I got a management level job above entry level at Motorola Corporation, and became a significant player there, and nobody else that I can think of in my position could have got that job. But I sold myself to the job to get that job to turn things around immediately. So that was an important turning point in my life, and it meant something to me. I've had others. The most recent was just before I turned 60. I was 59 years old. That usually comes just before 60, and I was, I was building websites and running a business doing that, and I was still caught in the old marketing paradigm, the in-your-face, advertising, Madison Avenue kind of approach, hype and billboard ads, that kind of thing, and that mentality, which is what I grew up through. That's what I learned in the the 60s and the 70s and the 80s as I built my business and got my real business experience. I was carrying that baggage with me, so that. I was working with websites, and I was carrying that baggage. And I got an email, which normally would have gone into my spam, but for some reason didn't. And some guy was offering to give me a free 3-part webinar for nothing. Just come and have a look at this. I want to share something with you. That guy's name was Brendan Burchard. He's a motivational coach and big name guy, big guru. One of the biggest. It has been said that he's the highest paid in that field. He's certainly well paid in that field. Some of his services that he offers, he gets $10,000 for 3 days, or $25,000 for a stage appearance. I mean, the guy makes money. But he had a program called Product Blueprint, something, Total Product Blueprint, was what he was selling. It was a training program to make your own digital products. And I happened to just be interested at that moment in getting away from websites, getting more into coaching and teaching about websites. And I was looking for a couple of products to be able to offer to augment what I would be doing and carry me through. So it hit at the right time, and I have found that the universe tends to work that way. I can't say that I'm totally one with the universe, but I recognize that concept. I certainly believe in what Yoda has to say, and I think that when you give to the universe gives back, and things come at times that you need them. You know, they say when the student is ready, the teacher will be there. And that's true. When you have a need, the universe will fill it if you just open your mind to the fact that it's there. And here I was looking for something, and along comes this Total Product Blueprint. So I went to the 3 videos, and the 3 videos, and I recommend them to anybody, do a Google search for Total Product Blueprint by Brendan Burchard, and he still offers it. He's got these 3 videos online. You sign up for free. The videos are absolutely free, but there's a sales pitch at the end, and he's got a $2,000 or $3,000 program that he wants to put you in. Well, I didn't want to take his $2,000, $3,000 program, but I certainly took the free videos, and what I discovered was that Brendan was repackaging what I had already studied in the past. I've had some of the best mentors, some of the greatest business experts, some of the most successful marketers that have shared with me and taught me. And some of the names were different and some of the modalities were different because we're in a new digital world, as we've talked. But the concepts were exactly the same. I've been there, done that, got the proverbial t-shirt. So the 3 free videos gave me everything I needed to know to do what I wanted to do. It was the motivation, the incentive, and the methodology. I already had the knowledge. I just had to repackage it and reapply it. So there was this big changing moment in my life, and so here I am 4 years later doing what I'm doing today, loving it, making my entire living online, giving to other people, sharing with other people, have changed my understanding of the paradigm for marketing. I predominantly work with inbound marketing. I don't hard sell things. I put stuff out there. Here's what I am. Here's what I do. And people come to me and say, Steve, can you help me with this? Steve, do you do this? What will it cost? I've had people come and say, where do I sign? So, it's whether, it depends. Some people can say, where do I sign, because they can afford and they know that they'll get charged what it's worth. Other people say how much because they can't afford, and they got to watch the pennies. And I work with both. I work with top end clients, and I work with people that are just getting started, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and people who need help and don't have a lot of money. To put a price tag on it, I'll work for as little as $25 for something, and I'll work for $25,000 if the right person comes along. So, it's a range, and I don't have to worry about that range. And it all comes together. But that was a defining moment in my life, getting that email out of the blue. For some reason, it didn't get filtered to spam. And, I followed it. And now, Brendan Burchard, I've actually never bought one of his products. I've paid a nominal fee, a shipping fee, to get 2 of his books free. And I actually haven't even got to this yet. This is the Millionaire Messenger. I recommend this to anybody. There's a book. And this is the audio book, and it's still sealed in the cellophane. Someday I'll get around to listening to it, but I've got the book. I read the book, and then I gave the book away to a friend. It was such a good book, but I only paid the shipping to get it. He had a free promotional offer at the time. But I think of Brendan Burchard. I've actually got a couple of his programs. I've got his what's it called here? The Experts Academy. I've got that, the CD set. 7 or 8 CD set. That's a $3,000 package, and he sent that to me. He just we've interacted, and he said, "Here, you should have access to this." I have had a free invite to one of his other programs, a $2,500 program. He sent me tickets. I couldn't go. It was disappointing, but I couldn't go. Couldn't get the timing, and I don't travel very easily. So, what I'm looking for, and that's why I'm embracing this technology, Blab and other technologies like it, I'm looking for the ability to go to these places without going. I want to get live streaming from these places, and there's a device. It's a robot. You know the what are they called? The little things that you can ride on. They're a two-wheel scooter. The wheels are side by side, and
I think they're calling hoverboards. I think they're calling them that, or
those are the ones that the wheels are in line front to back. But the ones that the wheels are side by side that you stand on and you hold handlebars at the top and they stay upright.
Oh, the Segways?
Segways. That's the ones. Well, there's a robot device that's like a Segway. It has two wheels at the bottom. It uses the same technology to stay upright, and it's got a box and then this pole that comes up, and the pole has a bracket on it that will hold an iPad. And you put the iPad in the bracket and you run software on it, and it ties in. There's a cable that plugs in from the device into the iPad, and you can send that, ship it UPS to a conference that you want to go to. And the conference people can turn it on at the conference, and it'll run around the conference floor. It'll stand in the corner and watch the presentation. It'll go into the networking sessions and greet people. And your mug is on the iPad, and you're working from your computer at home, just like we're doing here on Blab. Only it would be John Chang on the iPad scooting around the floor on this Segway-like device. Now,
crazy.
I suggested to somebody on the Belu forum a while ago, when Bill was looking at how he could live stream from one presentation that he was doing, and I suggested to somebody about that thing, and that there was probably a business in there that you could get a bunch of those if you happen to be in Los Angeles, which is a big convention city. I think the person I was suggesting it to may have been in Las Vegas. Same thing. You could get a bunch of those and offer the service. And, instead of me shipping the device to LA to see a seminar that you're at, I could rent one from you and have the software on my computer and talk to that particular one. And then I would be there in virtual service. And that's, it turns out there are services like that. A couple of big convention hotels have those devices available for rent. So where's the technology going? In a very short time, I will not have to leave my house in order to go to a big convention in LA to see Brendan Burchard, to take one of his seminars or whatever. I'll be able to just be there. It's absolutely astonishing. And we have no idea what's coming next.
I'm definitely excited as well for where technology is going and stuff. So what would you say though, like, is, in terms of with your own journey and stuff like that, you see where you see yourself going, and in terms of the next stage or the next level, and what would you like to share about that?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I see as a problem, and I would like to overcome that problem for myself and for others, it is the area of trust and engagement. There are so many crooked deals out there, so many Nigerian scams. Didn't you mention that you had experience with some scam or event just recently? I think, it was an email. Some email. Yeah. I mean, we are inundated with these things, so you don't know who to trust. You don't know what offer is really worth the price that it's being offered, and you just don't know, who you can engage with, that they're not going to take advantage of you at some point. And so I've tried to develop a base of clients that trust me. I've certainly honored that trust. I have worked with people in the best way I can. I've discovered my own limitations. I've discovered what I need to do with people up front to let them know what the expectations are. I think that's important when we're dealing with clients, is to be sure that expectations both ways are covered. And that's my responsibility. If I deal with you as a client, then it's my responsibility to ensure that you know what's going on. I can't expect you to understand what my expectations are. So, I think that's important. So I'm developing that kind of a thing, and I want to package it, share it with others. And I'm working towards building networks of people that also understand that. And John, let me say that you absolutely touched me with something you said a while ago, not in this session tonight, but several weeks ago. You talked about your own goal of reaching out to 10 people or 100 people, reaching out to 10 people or 100 people so that ultimately you could reach a network of 1,000 people. That 1,000 people was manageable. You could share with them, you could reach out to them, and you didn't say it this way, but what it said to me was you could also handle the feedback that you got to understand what was happening with that group. People say there's 500 million people on Facebook every day. Well, I can't handle 500 million people. I don't know about you, but I don't want 500 million people. But that 1,000 number, that's a doable number. That's reachable. That's embraceable. That's engageable, right? Engagement. And we can build relationships with 1,000 people. We can build trust with 1,000 people. And in that 1,000 people, we can find 100 clients. And 100 clients for me would be just about right. So that's, I think, is that we have to think bigger by thinking smaller. It's like I did with my bulletin board system. I made changes in the system to make it more friendly, and then I reached out to a limited group of people that we could handle. And whatever number of phone lines we had, whatever engagement we had, that was a workable number. And I didn't try to grow bigger than that. It peaked out at about 7,500 people, and that was right for an online system. Now, working with an online client base and engagement base, not just a system that delivers it, but actually working with the people, probably 1,000 is about the right number. And I like that. So that's my future. That's going forward. I want to work with key people who are interested in working with me. The knowledge that I can share, the experience that I can share, and the things that I can learn from them. It's a two-way street. And I am certainly not arrogant enough. I might be arrogant in some ways, but I am not arrogant enough to think it's all from me. I can talk a blue streak as I've done tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how you repurpose this material, because I think there's some good material in here, and I'm looking at the hands of an expert to cut it up into the right pieces. So I'm looking forward to that. But I certainly am humble enough to realize that until the day I die, to my dying breath, I will be learning from others. And when we find the right people like you and I that can engage on different topics. We've had conversations at different times about different things. The sharing, I've learned things from you, John, that I wouldn't have got anywhere else, and I thank you for that. And I hope that I've shared things with you that have helped you. And if we help each other a little bit on our journeys, just that inch leads toward the goal. We all win. If we can find 1,000 people between us, if it's the same 1,000 people and you and I are part of it, man, what can we do with that? What can each of the players in that group do? The opportunity is phenomenal, and look at the technology that we've got to do. I really, I get a little frustrated, and I sound like my grandfather again. I hear my grandfather's voice sometimes when I do it. But I've got younger kids. I got two sets of kids. I'm in a second marriage. My first marriage, I had two kids of my own. In my second marriage, I got two kids along with the marriage. Wonderful girls, 4 girls, and all wonderful people with their own careers, their own interests, their own paths. But I look at the younger two, and I get frustrated sometimes, because they use the technology. They have it at their fingertips. They have the cell phones, they have the other devices, the laptops, the tablets, and so on, and they don't appreciate them because they're just everyday things. It's not that they are negative towards them. I don't mean that. They use them, but they don't understand the power they have in their hand because they've never not had it. And if we can deliver some understanding to some of the younger people, the kids and the young adults, the millennials, if we can deliver an understanding of what they have and what they can do with it, if that's all we serve, we've done some wonderful stuff. It isn't about me and what I'm going to get. Okay, that obviously that factors into it. We're always, there's three important questions when anybody goes to a website, and I do a lot of website analysis, and there's three important questions. Eben Pagan is the coach and the guru who shared this with me, and I'm just so thankful for it. Three questions: what is it? Who is it about? And what do I get? Those are three questions that people answer or people ask either openly or subconsciously when they go to a website. What is it? When you land on a website, even if you're going to that website with a purpose, you want to be sure you've got to the right website. What is it? So if that website doesn't tell you what it is, if it's got some flowery, fancy deal that kind of uses all kinds of neat, cool words, but it doesn't tell you where you are, you're gone. Who's it about?
Yeah.
And if you understand that, it's not, when I go to John Chang's website, it better not be about John Chang. It better be about me. Who it is about is the client. You need to convey to your client, that your visitor, your target market, that this website is about them. You may have an about me page that's about you, but you've got to have the content of that website, especially on that first page, understand who they are, and so they know it's about them and they're going to stay. And then the third thing is, what do I get? People are in it for what they get. They're coming to get something. So what is this website going to deliver for me? Not a bunch of flowery words and pictures, but what is it? Narrow it down. And so if you answer those three questions, I think those questions apply to everybody in engagement. And so, yes, there's what is it for me, but there's also what is it for you? If we're engaging, it's got to be two ways. And so, I absolutely think that as we develop that network of people that are interacting with each other, if we can answer that question for everybody can see what's in it for them, well, then it's what's in it for everybody else. It's just a win-win across the board. And I'm so excited about that because for the first time, technology truly supports that. You don't have to go out and meet a person and shake hands. It's unfortunate that we don't, because there's something to actually being in the presence of a person. But the technology now for the everyday person, you don't have to have a huge amount of money to be able to get on Blab and meet the way we're meeting today. That's a powerful, powerful tool that cuts across continents, anywhere in the world. On the Balo forum, Steve Cartwright is at Steve. He's from a little place outside of Perth, Australia. I don't expect to ever get to Perth, Australia. It'd be nice, but I don't expect to ever get there. Besides, they have crazy mean spiders there, so I don't know. But it's. But I feel I know him. I sent him some business today, at least a referral. I don't know if it'll come into business, but I was on a forum, and a guy was asking for some help with something. It's something that I could do, but I would be stretching to do it the way this guy wants. It would tie me down for things that I don't want to be tied down for. But I know that Steve is bang on able to handle this particular job. He'll handle it in his sleep, which he never does, but he'll handle it in his sleep. And so I sent this guy to Steve, and I said, tell him the Rev sent you. And so Steve will know where it came from. And if he puts business together, wonderful. And I'm not expecting a dime out of it, but maybe Steve will say thank you, and maybe the other guy will say thank you if it works. But there's a little bit of networking. And I see Steve in my network. And now if this guy works with Steve, and we've already connected because I sent him to Steve, and you and I are working now, and you're on the forum and you know Steve, look, we just added another person to our network, and you didn't even know it until I just told you. So where is the power? You don't get that in other things. And we've got it here with a combination of technologies. It isn't one. Don't just use Blab. Don't just use a forum. Don't just use Facebook. You have to put together a combination, and you want to do it right, and you need to get help. And if somebody needs help, I'm here. Look me up. But, we put these things together, and we have awesome technology at our hands, at our fingertips, literally at our fingertips, at the keyboard and the mouse, literally at our fingertips, that 20 years ago you wouldn't have had without a great deal of expense in the tens of thousands of dollars, and 30 years ago didn't even exist at all. I was at Motorola when the first live conference phone, you see them in movies sometimes, they're kind of a sleek, sloped device. It's got 3 panels on it. There's 3 speakers in it. They're microphones and speakers that sits in the middle of a conference table, and you can be talking around the conference. Well, when that was first created, I was at Motorola when that came out, and that was audible only, sat on the conference table, and you could connect places together. And later on, they added, a video into it so that you could have a flat screen TV. And now I understand they've got holographic effects so that people can actually sit in the chairs across from you. It's mind-boggling where it's going. And yet here you and I are, those things, that little thing that sat on the table and the network to carry it, it didn't come over the phone lines or internet. There was no internet. You had to have line drivers and modulators and all kinds of stuff and direct signal channels and, thousands of dollars worth of equipment, tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment to deliver a conversation between 2 boardrooms. Now we're doing it. I'm in my little office here in my house. It's a converted bedroom, and I'm not sure where you are, but I think you're at home. And you and I have had conversations where you've been in a coffee shop. It's mind-bending. We've got, if we don't do something with this technology, John, we're crazy. We're lazy. And we have gone way over time, and I'll shut up now because I am verbose. But I admire what you're doing, and I encourage you to keep doing it because you're onto something here. And I'm honestly looking forward to seeing this material. I'd love a copy of the video if you would share it with me, and I want to see what you do with the repurposing of it. And I'm going to learn from that because I've participated in this. It'll make so much more sense to me as I see it. And I think you're absolutely onto something. I will share one last thing. You and I had a presentation today earlier on a place called Network Live Virtually, and you were talking about that repurposing. And you shared the numbers, which absolutely dazzled me. You said that you had 18. I mean, I've committed this to memory because I think it's an example that's so powerful. You had 18 interviews like this one, and you repurposed them. You put them on YouTube, and you cut them up into segments, and you did some blog posts and some other things out of them. I won't go into the details of all of it, but you ended up with 81 content pieces out of 18 interviews, and that didn't include the 18 interviews themselves. So 81 items. That's, I mean, even if you're posting a couple or 3 a day on blog posts and online, if your commitment is 2 to 3 items a day, that's a full month of content out of 18 interviews. That's dazzling. You're truly onto something, and I'm looking forward to seeing the outcomes of it as we progress forward.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, I definitely appreciate you coming by. And, just for the purposes of the folks maybe watching later on and stuff like that, what's the best way for them to reach you or to learn more about what you do?
I have several websites. I'm involved in a variety of different things from web work to coaching to mentoring and writing. But the best place to start to find me, and probably the easiest, is Wizards Place, Wizards plural, place.com. And if you do a Google search for Wizards Place, put it together as one word, Wizards Place, because if you do it as 2 words, you get Wizards of Waverly Place that fill up all the spots in Google. They're bigger than me. But if you do Wizards Place, I should come up if you put it as one word, I should come up as number 1 in Google and several times on the first page. The Wiz, TheWiz, at ourhutch.com, OURHUTCH.com. I live in Hutchinson, Kansas, and we call it Hutch. So this is Our Hutch. And the whiz at ourhutch.com will get me by email. And I'm always glad to receive email from people. If you put whiz, W-I-Z, in uppercase letters as the first word of your subject in an email message, I have a filter that pulls that out, so I'm sure to get it. You can put whatever else you want for the subject of the email after that, but put WIZ as the first three letters. It just means your email's more likely to get cut. I get a lot of spam. I've got multiple websites. I have multiple email addresses. They all come into the same account, so I get tons, literally tons of spam, and messages do go astray. So if I don't get back to you within 24, 48 hours max, and you still want to get a hold of me, send it again. I really do mean to get back to you, and I check my email daily, usually, not always. But email is a good way, and Wizard's Place, you can comment there. You can get the contact form. There's a contact page, a good place to contact me. And I'll take inquiries.
Awesome.
And I'll try my best to help where I can.
Well, thanks, Steve. Really appreciate you stopping by again, and it's been really an honor to, not only chat again with you, but to learn more about your story. That's been really for me, one of the greatest parts about this was just, we've met and we've talked different times, but it's been awesome just to kind of get more down to, where you came from and the different things that you've experienced on your journey. So we'll look forward to sharing it more on the different channels, as you said, when I repurpose this, and we'll connect again soon.
Thank you very much, John. It has been a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to know you, to have met you. The opportunities are there. Thank you.
Sure thing.